Hello folks, welcome back to another video. Today we are super lucky to be joined by Brenna Lowry, who is the head of marketing at Doist. For those who don't know, Doist is a company that creates two tools, Todoist and Twist, very popular remote tools, and they have been advocating remote work for many years now, and obviously very much a thought leader in the space. Now, you guys had the opportunity to send in your questions, and we've put them to Brenna in today's video, which will be incredibly helpful for those who have recently gone remote, working from home, and in a situation where they need to be productive in this new environment. Now, before we begin, there is a code that Todoist has shared with me, which is very kind of them. If you use the code together and you are currently not on Todoist Premium, then you can get 3 months of Todoist for free, and you can claim that anytime from now all the way to the end of the year. A big shout out to the team for putting that together, and thank you very much to Brenna for coming along. So without further ado, guys, let's dive into this interview. Brenna, thanks so much for coming on. It's really appreciated, and obviously there's a lot of people who need this advice right now, and you guys at Doist have been working very hard, obviously helping people get used to remote. So my first question for you is more on the topic of how Doist first got into obviously working remotely, how long you guys have been working remotely, and also a little bit about the core values, because you guys do well at, I think, that topic.
Yeah, sure. I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys about this because this is something that we've been doing since 2011. So Amir started Todoist in 2007 by himself. And then when people started using the app more and more, he hired a freelance support specialist whose name is David. He's still with the company, and that was in 2011. And at that point, Amir was in Chile, and David is in Poland. And Amir just he was looking to find people in Chile, but had kind of a hard time. So he was using this Elance platform, I think it was. And then I guess that was just the beginning of everything. And ever since then, we've been fully remote. And even I was also living in Chile at the time, and that's how I met Amir and Alan, who is our COO, who was also living in Chile. But I think even though we lived a few kilometers from each other, we only met in person 1 or 2 times. So it has always been in our company's DNA to be fully remote and basically asynchronous. So that's something we've been doing for pretty much a decade at this point. And our core values have really informed a lot of kind of our own best practices around remote work. So our first core value is independence. Which is basically you can get work done on your own. You don't need somebody, micromanaging you or breathing down your neck, telling you what to do. So that's a really important one for us. And we have a few other core values like mastery, kind of learning how to be the best at your own craft. Communication, which is also obviously super important for remote workers. You need to, know how to communicate properly and not go radio silent. Yeah, we have a few others which are not coming to me off the top of my head.
That's it. And I think touching on there, some people don't, maybe tuning into this and going, asynchronous, what's that? Maybe you could give a bit of the definition of it to help.
Yeah. Asynchronous communication is a very unsexy term for a pretty actually cool concept, which we have been pretty much practicing ever since the beginning at Doist. So at its core, asynchronous communication means that you aren't expecting an immediate response, basically. So at Doist, anytime somebody sends a message to each other or adds a comment in a thread, we're never expecting somebody to respond immediately, which, I mean, it's impossible, right? We have people in, I think, 30 different countries. So that is not feasible in the first place, just due to our geography. So we've kind of set up like more or less, you should try to respond to people within a 24-hour time frame just to keep work going. But the great thing about being asynchronous is that like you can actually sit down to craft like a well thought out response rather than just responding in the moment, like a knee jerk reaction. So a lot of times, like I'll wake up, you know, most of my colleagues at Doist are in Central European time zone, and I'm in Pacific time zone, so I'm kind of like late to the game most days. But I never feel like I'm missing out on anything. And whenever I log in, I kind of go through my threads in Twist, which is our team communication app. And I, you know, kind of browse and see what's going on. But I never feel like this panic when I log in the morning, like, oh my gosh, I need to respond to all this stuff before everybody, you know, goes home for the day. So it's a pretty ideal way to work when you're working with so many people across different time zones.
Yeah, definitely. And it, like, I think with that as well, you're not like getting that overwhelm in the morning when you open it, because you've got these principles in place that can help.
Yeah, and it's crazy because in 2014, I think it was, we were using Slack, and that was really hard. Like, I kind of like telling the story because it's sort of a perfect depiction of this change that we went through, because, you know, being in Pacific time and having most of my colleagues in Europe, like I would just wake up to this like incoherent mess of messages and like trying to sift through and follow the different conversations, and like, you know, decisions were being made like while I was still asleep, and it felt so overwhelming and stressful and like kind of unfair actually. And that really kind of went against everything that we have always tried to, you know, implement at Doist. Like it really went against a lot of our core values and stuff. So this is why we created Twist actually, which thank God, because it's very like a non-stressful environment.
Yeah, we use it. We love it. It's you've done a good job on that. And mentioning Twist, you guys have got those remote guides, right? That can help. I think they, like, if you're watching along and you want to find out how to get a remote fast, it's really good guides. And I think there's like even ones that talk about the logistics of the tax, because I think like people are actually considering it now. Like they've been at home a few weeks and they're going, actually, it isn't too bad.
Yeah, so if anybody who's watching, you go to twist.com/remote-work-guides. We have 7 like super in-depth, like quite long guides that our team put together after doing a ton of interviews with like over 30 different companies that do remote. So right, there's anything from like, what is remote work, to like actually the logistics one that you said, or like designing. There's a guide for designers and a guide for managers. And we're definitely seeing like an uptick in traffic on those. I think people are kind of scrambling to look for best practices, which I'm happy that we can help people with. Definitely,
yeah. So our first question from Arkita Sharma, I'm going to butcher people's names here. Do the same work from home rules, you know, the good practices that you guys have been talking about a lot for many years, do they work during this pandemic time? Can you implement the same sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on who you're asking. I think a lot of the best practices do still stand up. Like teams should obviously still try to like lean towards more asynchronous communication models. But like for me personally, I have a 3.5-year-old daughter and she's not in school right now. So my schedule is a complete mess basically. So I think it depends a lot on what are your other external circumstances, but and also the company that you work for. Like I I worry that a lot of companies are, forcing sort of these like office practices on people in a remote setting, and that's not really productive, I think. Like I was speaking with my neighbor, and she said that she's in Zoom meetings for like 6 hours a day, just to kind of like, I think her managers like want to know that she's doing something, which is strange. Why you would put people in meetings. But I guess and also depends on how your mental health is, right? So like, it depends on if you maybe have a family member that is sick, or you are living in, one of these really hard hit areas like Italy or New York or Spain. Like, depends a lot on your external circumstances, I think. So depending on that, I think you have to work on just what works for you and navigate the situation of your company. And that's a hard question. I wish I had more.
It is. I think it's almost like making a plan to the best you can possibly do it now, isn't it? So question number 2 is from Pauline Lucrezia, and she asks, do Doist use screen/voice/video messaging, and how does that fall into the asynchronous messaging that you guys do?
Yeah, so we try and keep meetings to a minimum, just because it's honestly kind of hard to get people in the same place at the same time with all the different time zones that we're in. So for example, on my team, and I think this is pretty much the same for everybody, more or less, I do monthly one-on-one video calls with my direct reports. I have a few bi-monthly video calls. We do work occasionally synchronously, but we try and keep most everything inside Doist and in written form and threads, just so that everybody can stay on top of what's happening. We don't have like any daily stand-ups or anything like that. It would be impossible for us, to be honest.
Yeah. With that many time zones, it'd be mental. Yeah. Brilliant. In terms of essential tools that Doist use, which ones do you use? And that question was from Tristan Liu.
Well, you'll probably be surprised to hear that we use Todoist and we use Doist. But besides those two, which are very heavily that we use, our engineering teams use GitHub. We use on the marketing team Dropbox Paper pretty frequently. A lot of like writing tools, I guess. We use Figma also if we're designing a landing page, which is an easy way for us to collaborate on design and copy at the same time. What else do we use? We use Zoom, I guess. Look for a different, an alternative. We have Whereby, which is actually integrated into Doist, so we're trying to use that a little bit more these days. But yeah, I think most everything is Todoist and Doist, to be honest.
Does the majority of the job. Yeah, definitely. The next one is actually one that I think will be something that I think can like really help with. Okay, so a question from Caitlin Fortin, who asks, how do you speak to a manager regarding their sort of belief that you need to work the physical hours, 8 hours, say, versus the output of the work, and trying to convince them against it, I guess?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of best practices around remote work that say like it's not the hours that you put in, it's the output that you give, right? So I think there's probably a lot of sources that this person could look for that say, remote work is about setting a schedule that works for you. And generally, a lot of people are more productive when they work from home or don't work in an office because they have fewer meetings, they have fewer distractions in their environment. So generally people tend to be more productive. So if they can maybe dig up those sources and share those with their manager, that might be a good start. And then just leading by example, like, I think people can say like, look, I, did XYZ that, I had on my to-do list today, and it's 3 p.m. Like, if they're in this like synchronous environment, say like, let me know if you need anything, but I'm already done for the day. I think, like leading by example and, showing that, proving to your manager that, this is in fact, possible, is probably a good way to start.
Yeah, that's good advice. Kill them with facts, drown them in them.
We have a lot of, we have 2 particular blog posts on our blog, which is doist.com/blog, that I think could actually be really helpful. Our first, we have a quite popular blog posts about like asking your manager to work from home, and just some like hypothetical conversations around that. And then I wrote a blog post, quite a long one, about trust versus tracking in remote environments, and just some ways that managers can feel more comfortable trusting their employees rather than like this feeling strange about them not sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day. So I would check those out if you have some time.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'll include those below. Okay. Yeah, I think I may have even read them. And they're great. Brilliant. Brilliant. All right. Okay. Okay. So the next question is from myself. In about 3 or 4 years, how do you go about working from home with kids?
Yeah, that's tough. Usually my daughter is in preschool all day, so this is certainly an adjustment for me as well. But I did work with her at home until she was about a year old. And at first it was like pretty easy, babies sleep a lot, and, they aren't mobile basically for the first years. So you can just kind of like plop them down, and it was much easier to get work done before my daughter started walking. But right now, now that she is home, my husband is home as well. So we are setting up our schedules more or less on a day-to-day basis, and say like, usually my meetings are in the morning because most of my team is based in Europe. So usually I kind of take the morning work shifts, and then he takes care of her, and then we have lunch together, and then he takes the afternoon work shift. Which is hard, right? Like we're obviously not being anywhere near as productive as we used to, but it's kind of the only way that has worked for us. And I don't know. I guess my best advice would be to, like, if you're in this situation where you're having to work with your kid. So I think I was saying like my best bit of advice is just to be extra communicative, and even if you need to find a whiteboard or something, like my husband and I set up a shared Google Calendar so I can put all the time slots where I have meetings, and just so that it's super clear to try and avoid any miscommunications that might happen.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Shared Google Calendar right there. Brilliant. Fantastic. My final question for you, should you, when you're working remotely, typically follow the 9 to 5 schedule, especially now you've got some of the commute time back and things like that?
Yeah, I guess this is another question that really depends on the person who's asking it. Obviously, the beauty of remote work should be, in a perfect world, that you can set your own schedule and set your own hours to work in the fashion that is best for you. So, at least at Doist, like if that means that I want to wake up at 3 a.m. and work until 11 a.m. and so I have the rest of my day, like I could totally do that. It really depends on what you want to achieve in your day. Like if you are a morning person, like there shouldn't be anything that stops you from, getting up at 5 a.m. and doing some work and then going for a nice long walk in the afternoon and ending your day early. This is, I think, one of the biggest perks of remote work is that you should, setting a schedule that is best for your rhythms and your lifestyle and what you need as a person. So hopefully in this situation where people are becoming, or going remote in sort of this quick, unexpected way, that managers are trying, that they can be more understanding of that. And like, the more productive people are going to be depends on, if they're working at their peak hours. So if you force somebody to do a 9 to 5 that is like clearly a night owl, then that's probably not going to go so well.
Yeah, that's it. It's good advice there. Hey folks, I totally realised that I didn't record an outro. Me and Brenna just carried on chatting. So a big thank you to Brenna and to the team for taking the time to put this together. So you can obviously find all of the links that were mentioned below. And naturally, I'd recommend checking out the resources. These guys have been in the space for a fair while, and as I said, they're always my go-to resource, so do check them out, and big thank you again. So guys, I'll see you in a future video. Please do subscribe, obviously, or follow Brenna on Twitter, and naturally come back for another Keep Productive video. Guys, I'll see you very soon. Cheerio.